Well, it's wet again, but no complaints. Compared to that hot weather, I am wrapped. It is so much nicer. I've got more energy. You can do things, and yeah, I even slept without the aircon last night for the first time. So for probably a couple of weeks. So that was nice, and it'll be that way at least for a few more nights, I'd say. So that's a nice change. So that's good news. On the bad news, of course, our corporate leadership in Australia has again made ridiculous woke decisions. And this occasion, it's our supermarkets, specifically Woolworths and Aldi, which is an interesting combo, who have both removed all Australia Day merchandise from their shelves. I just don't understand what's going through their tiny little minds. I mean, the people at Coles must be rubbing their hands with glee, thinking, what are these morons doing? Trying to alienate so many Australians. And there are calls for boycotts. So I think I've got to do some Woolworths shopping today, but I will at least cutting back on what I'm buying. This is going to affect me. I'm really pissed off with them. I just stay out of politics, for God's sake. And what's even more extraordinary is Aldi. Aldi is a German-owned grocery chain. And what are they doing, poking their noses in our politics? Because it is a very political decision about Australia Day. You know, it's all the first settler stuff as opposed to January 26th. You know, it's just become an issue out of nowhere. And I just think it's just, you know, it's been pushed by certain agendas, and it's caused a lot of damage. Been trying to undermine that day for years. I'm not particularly jingoistic, by the way, and I don't do anything particularly special on January the 26th. The holiday means nothing to me, of course, because I'm retired, and it's never really been a big deal for me. But for God's sake, if people want to celebrate when the vast majority of people, the culture of this country now was established, and that's what it's really about. And we're not the first people to come to Australia, we know that. And it's fair enough to acknowledge that, although I don't believe in welcome to country. I think that's BS as well. Pushed by the same band of inner suburban people woke people who keep trying to tell everybody else what to do. So the same people have been pushing EVs too hard ahead of the actual technology. This is a pattern that just continually repeats. And because if you're an activist and you've got an education behind you, you've got connections, you can push this sort of stuff onto the populace. But I don't think it'll be like a Bud Light thing regarding this situation. Oh, by the way, it's not just the grocery chains either. It's actually Bunnings and Kmart as well. I mean, it's very depressing. You know, I just butt out of it. Just go and try to make money like they used to do. But all these companies, including banks, are all getting into politics now, and it's really ugly. And you know, I think greed, the old Gorgon Gecko greed thing's not good without a bit of compassion. But corporates getting involved in politics is not good either. The bus driver's wondering whether I wanted to go up to the shops. I wasn't, so I could tell they were decelerating a little bit. Anyway, the bus is going, that's good. And so that's the bad news. Now back to some good news on a personal level. I finally cracked it for a sale of one of my short stories. I've only got one short story on Amazon at the moment, and it's one of my subscribers, I'm sure, because two people actually contacted me, asked me about the story, and asked me where it was, and sounded like they were prepared to actually purchase it. It's not going to break the bank, mind you. It's 99 cents US, so it's about $1.40 something Australian. But I really appreciate that anyway. I'm very, very grateful. So thank you very much for doing that. One other slight favour is if you do have anything positive to say about the story, because I mean you may hate it, you may think it stinks, but if you don't, could you please write a review? Because it is very important to have that feedback. I know that if I'm looking through its stories and you see a whole lot of positive reviews, it definitely counts for more. It's the same as when you're looking at Google for reviews of anything. The same thing applies, but no, I didn't expect anybody to do that, to actually any of my subscribers to volunteer to purchase it. So look, I really do appreciate it. And if it just sort of at least it raises my presence online, it could be a big bonus, because you just got to, it's always the first step that's the hardest. You've got to establish yourself from scratch. The other thing I did today, I'm just such an idiot with technology. I did a new book cover, and I don't even know really it's an improvement. The picture's better. I got that from a copyright-free site. Well, I hope it's copyright-free, that's what they said. And I'm using that image, which is actually a space colony, an O'Neill cylinder, an internal shot of an O'Neill cylinder, but I put my own text on it and changed the copy a little bit. It probably, I hope it doesn't look too amateurish, but what I hadn't done is push the save button. So I've been waiting for this new image and text to come up on the book, where the book is, the book title page, and it hadn't happened. So I just realised today, like a dummy I am, I hadn't actually pushed that magic button to get things rolling. But now I have, and I think it's probably in a day or two the new design might be there, but it may be not such a great thing, I don't know. You know, it's all a learning process, and I'm just feeling my way through it all. But I'm just really happy to at least put a story online and starting it. The other thing I discovered too is if you're writing anything, like stories or whatever, the other option you can use is Google Docs. And that's got virtually all the bells and whistles you've got with Microsoft Word. It's probably missing a few things, so I don't exactly know what isn't there, but a lot of the basic stuff is there, and there's no charge. So why would you be paying about 120 bucks a year for Microsoft Word when you can get Google Docs for free, and you can save your work to your disk? But it's also saved in the cloud as well. So it seems to be good. I've used it, and I'm starting to use it properly, and I think it's actually quite a good piece of software. So I think it's a much better deal than Microsoft. They're just so greedy at Microsoft. Yeah, I'm really laying into the corporates, aren't I? Well, there are good corporates, but there's some real shockers too. So anyway, that's my update today, and luckily we've got some rain and it's cooler weather, and I'm loving it, absolutely loving it. It is so much nicer. It's Thursday and it's quite humid out. We've had quite a bit of moisture, and every day it's a humid day. When you look at the forecast, you see how much grass I've got to have mowed here and the front, and there's water in the gutters, so you can see we've had a lot of moisture. And I guess the good news is that it's around 10 o'clock in the morning, and once the sun comes out, it does burn off a bit of that moisture. So I'm going to go down to the beach. I haven't been down for over a week, so it's about time. I'm getting cabin fever. I've just been lazy. I've actually done a little bit of riding, so it has been a little productive, but yesterday I did nothing. So I need to get out and about, and it'll be good for my mental health, because I think I was getting a bit, the cabin fever was getting to me yesterday. Anyway, some big news when it comes to what's happening with the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. I don't know if you know this, but the Ukrainians were able to take down a couple of very expensive planes. One in particular was a surveillance plane worth hundreds of millions of dollars. That's a huge blow to the Russians. But more importantly, I think, is what's happened in Bashkortostan. You probably never heard of this place. I haven't heard of it before, but it's a provincial area about 1,500 kilometers east of Moscow. So it's going right towards Siberia. What's happened there is there's actually been riots, open riots, which is something that just doesn't happen with the Putin regime, because they seem to spend a lot of money on internal security, which is what an aspect of any sort of totalitarian regime, I guess. I'm sure the Nazis spent a lot on internal security as well. So there were a lot of police with batons, and there was hundreds, maybe thousands of people who were protesting in this region because one of their leaders had been sentenced to 4 years. Well, the prosecution wanted 4 years in prison because he was making anti-war comments. And you can understand why, because a lot of these soldiers that have been sent to Ukraine are from the provinces, from these sorts of regions, because Putin's too scared to send people from Moscow and St. Petersburg, because that would cause a huge backlash in his own backyard. So he's quite happy to sacrifice people from provincial areas. And that's what's been happening. But this leader, I don't know what his name is, I'll put it up on screen anyway. It was in the Daily Mail today, so it got coverage, quite large coverage. The prosecution wanted to put him away for 4 years. The judge actually gave a more severe sentence than what the prosecution was asking for. So that just set the public off. And it's only a small provincial town where this occurred. Very small if you look at it on the map. And I think they said there was 10,000 people out. I don't know that many were protesting, but I'd say it could have been around 1,000 or more. It was a lot of people. And apparently, of course, the old story, the police are bashing them and arresting, the usual sort of tactics that a fragile regime uses. And I think it is. I think the Putin regime is a house of cards, to be quite frank. I think it is much more fragile than people might think. And this sort of incident could actually be the beginning of the end. And it's something I was thinking could happen in Russia for a long time, because when you start exploiting a certain geographical area of your empire, the people there know that. They're not idiots. They know that they're sacrificing a lot of their young men. The mothers are obviously not happy, the wives, girlfriends. This builds up resentment, and now that one group has openly rebelled, this could be what leads to more happening. I think the Prigozhin thing showed the fragility of the Putin regime midway through last year. That Prigozhin could get so close to Moscow, and he just made a bad tactical move from what I can gather. If he kept marching, I doubt whether he would have got a great deal of resistance, but that's speculative. I've no idea. But it certainly looked that way. The perception in the populace, and if that's the perception that you have a fragile regime, what can happen is that other provincial areas may also start protesting, and if too much of it occurs, the Russians will be they'll find it very difficult to actually quell this, because their military is all tied up in the Ukraine, so they're very vulnerable, because people were able to get across the border from Ukraine into the next province of Russia without any problems, because the military have been basically used in Ukraine. They're basically, there's no reserves as such. I mean, they're getting so desperate that what Putin's latest ploy is to basically cut all the heating off from the prisoners that he has. So the normal prisons have now haven't got heating as an incentive for them to join the army, because if they don't, they'll just freeze to death in the prisons. I mean, that's how brutal this regime has got. And of course, it's not just prisoners who are freezing. That's the other aspect too. The other consequence of all this manpower going into the military, now we find that there's not enough people to actually maintain the infrastructure for electricity and hot water. And people, even in Moscow, are freezing in their apartment blocks. So, you know, it's just extraordinary what's going on. There's just basically a whole lot of issues that are coming from the fact that they've got a very low unemployment figure, which you'd think is actually a positive in most countries, but it's not in Russia. All it means is there's just not enough people to fill spots. And what happens as a consequence is that the wages go up because they're in short supply, the labour. And so what leads from that point? Inflation. I think we're all familiar with that. So you can see that there's a lot happening here. There's a lot of issues to take into account, and yeah, a lot of consequences from these actions. So that's basically the latest in Russia. And I don't know exactly how it's going to pan out because there's just far too many variables, but certainly the possibility of Russia breaking up into separate republics is definitely on the cards. As the weaker the central area gets, I mean, I'm watching The Last Day of Rome, a documentary on that, and it's the Romans at one stage, they got to a stage where they just didn't have enough manpower to have Roman soldiers, so they had to use people from other areas, Visigoths and the like, you know, to bolster their forces. And that means their loyalties were divided. And they didn't have the same ethics and loyalty that the Roman soldiers had. And as a consequence, civil war broke out amongst the ranks. So it was inevitable that Rome would just collapse and be taken over by barbarians. And so, you know, history does repeat itself. And, you know, I just personally can't see this regime lasting that much longer. It's just untenable. If you need to get your artillery shells from North Korea, that's a sign of desperation, in my opinion. So, yeah, that's what I think, for what it's worth. I'm having fun and games with customer service as usual. I'm down at the beach, which is wonderful. There's a bit of a breeze here. It's quite nice. Smells a bit pongy. Don't know what that's about. Definitely pongy. You can see there's quite a bit of yeah, you can see that the rains have had an effect on the beach. It's hardly in pristine condition and there's a bit of crap in the water, so I guess that's to be expected. When it does rain at the moment, it just buckets till it's monsoonal. But anyway, I was just going to talk about customer service. It's just, I don't know, I just got this feeling that it's just going downhill everywhere. And the last time people I had to speak to were ComSec, who look after my share portfolio at Commonwealth Bank. They promised to me that they'd be sending me some sort of a note to say that I had been a victim of fraud, because that's all I wanted. I had this conversation with them last week, and they're trying to fob me off on the share registry, who are the ones who actually pay dividends. And I said to them, look, they don't know anything about the fact that I've been a victim of identity fraud. That occurred at the banking level, because they'd done all the reversals and what have you at the Combank, so they knew all about it. So thinking, why would I want to go to a share registry that has no knowledge of this situation? I'm trying to chase, I don't want to be paying tax on dividends that have been paid into some offshore account that's run by scammers, which is where 720 bucks of my dough went. So it's important to me to get this sorted out, plus the fact that they sold my shares without my authorisation. That would also come in probably as a capital gain with the ATO. The ComSec couldn't actually confirm how the ATO would treat that. So if I don't do something about it now, then I'll have to go and try to explain to the ATO, and then the ATO hopefully can contact CBA. But it shouldn't happen this way. The point is, geez, I'm not the only person that's been defrauded. You think they'd have systems in place to deal with this, but it appears they don't. But again, it's just another example of poor customer service. The guy who spoke to me on the phone, he sounded quite sympathetic, I'll grant you that, but he didn't seem to have that much power either. He had to defer to a senior person. I would have got the original person, I had to be transferred from them to this guy's specialist, and then after that he had to talk to his boss. You know, it's always good to get the decision maker if you can, but sometimes with mobs like banks, which are gigantic bureaucracies, it can be very difficult. But the bottom line is, he said 48 hours they'd email me this note, and that was last week. I'm still waiting to hear from them. Nothing. And I've also had another query with the CommBank about the balance of my housing loan that had jumped up about $150 to what it was prior to the frauds taking place. And I haven't heard about that one. I raised that one late last year, about 3 months ago, and haven't heard a thing back from them. Bloody abysmal. So CBA, you've got to pull your finger out, in my opinion, but you're not the only one. Aldi Mobile's supposed to get back to me and give me a credit for money paid in for the mobile account. Never heard from them. They said they'd call me the next day. Not a word. This is just so typical. It appears as if they need a truth serum, I think, a lot of these customer service people, because they're just not following through. That's my personal opinion. I don't know how other people are finding customer service these days. I'm dealing more on the phone, admittedly, which I loathe doing. I'd rather do it all online. The other thing too is I did an ID. I filled out an ID test for TPG Internet, and I had to show my passport. They took a photo of that, and also a photo of myself. And since then, that was yesterday, and I haven't heard anything back from them. So I'm thinking, what's the point of doing this unless you actually follow up on it? I've also contacted VietJet with change of email and phone number, because this is all the crap I have to do, because of the original email has been corrupted that I used for 90% of my transactions, and my old mobile number's gone. So I've had to, it's going to continue on for some time, this, with loose ends like this. So, but as I say, you know, the VietJet acknowledged they received my request, but they haven't got back to me. And again, that's over a week ago. So, yeah, very frustrating. God knows what it'd be like contacting during TET. Anyway, so that's the situation there. I'm supposed to be going on a trip, a flight in about 10 days or so, maybe 2 weeks. I can't remember the exact date, but I'm going up. I was supposed to be going down to Melbourne, but I don't know if I want to. I mean, the first problem was that they've had an outbreak of COVID down there, and I'm not too keen to go there. If I get infected prior to my overseas trip, that's not such a smart move. The other thing is, I just don't feel motivated to travel at the moment. I don't want to go on a flight. I just don't feel inclined to do it. You know, I had very little motivation yesterday to do much of anything. So, but yeah, I don't enjoy flying. I'm not really looking forward to being in Melbourne. I'm looking forward to catching up with my cousin. That'd be great. And I wish I'd done it for Christmas, but that's my other option, is to basically change the date of the flight until Christmas next year. But they may be going away, but I'll go on the assumption they're not, and I can always change the dates anyway. But the problem is, with the Virgin return flight that I've got, I could only get a flight up until the 13th of December. And I'm thinking, why is that? I mean, Jetstar don't restrict me to that sort of short time frame, but would be wanting to get a return flight after Christmas. But that's as far ahead as I can get from them. Well, the other thing that they did too was I had a direct flight back to Cairns, and they changed it to one going via Brisbane. I don't even recall them actually contacting me regarding that. You know, you think that'd be the right thing to do, just contact the customers for changing your flights like that, but nothing. So I put in a complaint to them. I know it's a bit petty, but I'm just not happy. And look, I told them truthfully, I said, well, this sort of thing will make me less inclined to choose you as an airline. You're going to start doing crap like that, bugger you. So, you know, we haven't got much choice though, have we? We've got them or Jetstar. So it's Sophie's choice when it comes to flights. You know, more and more I think about, the more I want to go on a cruise. If I want to go to Southeast Asia, like, it just, to me, it just seems a much better way of doing things. Even though I haven't been on a cruise and I might get a little bored on it, on the boat, there's still plenty to do. There's lots of people to meet, and there's, you know, I don't think it's going to be that bad. So look, I'm probably just being devil's advocate on that one, but the more I think about it, the more I'd really like to do that. And as far as cost benefit is concerned, you know, if you're not paying too much for your cabin a night, you know, you can basically, a couple of nights in a cabin would be the equivalent of a flight, but you're actually already on your holiday. It's not like the travel is a hassle, it's actually part of the experience, and that's the difference of being on a boat. So I really like that. So, but yeah, Jetstar have, Virgin cruises have only just started up in Australia, and they don't have many cruises to Southeast Asia. And probably the best I could hope for would be, say, if they left Brisbane and went via Bali to up to Singapore, something like that, and then I could just basically get a connecting flight from Singapore to Vietnam if I want to go there. That might be a possibility in the future, but right now they're just starting out, and I guess they're getting a feel for what the demand's like. But apparently demand for cruises is very high this year, because, you know, with COVID, of course, people hadn't been able to cruise for a few years, so there's pent-up demand. But there's probably a lot of people who feel like I do, and they're just fed up with flying, you know. And to cruise to Southeast Asia was quite viable. I wouldn't want to go on a longer cruise than that. Although I might be tempted to do the one that one of our drinking buddies is doing. There's a couple, they're going, they just did a South Sea cruise, I think with Princess, and they really like that. And they're going to be going Virgin from Dubai, I think it is. It's somewhere in the Persian Gulf anyway. And then they're stopping off in India and Sri Lanka, and of course going to Singapore and probably some other ports as well. But that could be a really interesting cruise. But I don't know. I mean, I could do something like that. I don't want to go to the Persian Gulf as such. I'd prefer it if it started somewhere else than there, but the idea for me would be to do a short cruise with them just to test the waters, pardon the pun. But yeah, that'd be good. Whew. Yeah, we've still got the still closed, unfortunately. It's ridiculous. They're going to stretch this out until March, I reckon, to open it up. This is rather poor. But I think that person just came through, just walked across anyway. It's coming forward here now. Not that I can see that well because of my crappy eyesight. But yeah, I think they're using it anyway. But no sign of any workmen around here. Oh, right, so up to where the bridge is. Actually, well, God, it's quite open. There you go. So that's the progress, which is virtually zero when it comes to the trail, but that's okay. I'm just so glad I got out and about anyway. No chance of swimming today. That's the red flag, and that's what it means. So, and there's no the nets are not up now because of what happened with all the floods. The other thing that's occurring too in the car industry is that mobs like GM and Ford in America are are really scaling back on EV production. The demand has just tanked, and the recent cold weather in places like Minnesota, Plains State in the US, gets very cold. Places like that, they've had lots of abandoned EVs, including Teslas, because they just can't handle the cold. The range is affected something like 30% maybe in range reduction, and in extreme cases you'll have situations where the car just conks out and you've just abandoned in the cold because people weren't aware that their battery life had been reduced by so much. And that's one of the traps with them. There's lots of things you have to be very careful with if you've got one. The other big problem too is charging stations. Public charging stations that aren't working, or they're got full to capacity, so you've got to wait in a line for hours on end to get your car charged. That was highlighted on YouTube in America. In Australia, one of the charging companies has decided to pull out of the Australian market. The economics of it is just not holding up. So if we don't have the infrastructure to charge cars like you do with filling up petrol vehicles from petrol stations, if you don't have the same sort of infrastructure, it's just not going to develop. So there's lots of challenges right now with EVs. They have been growing, but from a fairly small base compared to the incumbent, which are the ICE vehicles. So it appears to be crunch time. This year could make or break the current EV technology. And I say current because there's a hell of a lot of research going on to make them much more viable. But we may have to wait 5 years before, say, solid state batteries with fast charging times and decent range are commercially viable. We just don't know. This is what Elon Musk says. It's developing prototypes is relatively easy. Making low-cost, mass-produced items is the hard part. That's where, and he's not the only one who said that too. I've heard other people mention that as well. I'm sure Henry Ford probably said the same thing. So there you go. It's more a speed bump than an RIP EVs, because it's not like that. But they do have limited applications, and I would say that things like the Cybertruck working on current battery technology probably isn't that viable, because when you're towing something, especially if it's in cold weather, you can have range reductions of up to 100%. So yeah, it's just, they do have limitations. So I personally think that mobs like Ford and GM probably would have been more advised to get into hybrid production, ramp that up, learn a bit about the technology, because after all you've got to put an EV motor and battery into a hybrid, so you get some expertise there. The technology is nowhere near as mature as with ICE vehicles, because I mean we've had them around since the turn of the century. You could say the same with batteries, mind you, because cars did come out initially when cars first became consumer items back at the beginning of the 20th century. But they were the old lead acid batteries, very short range, probably very expensive, and just wasn't practical. Not when ICE vehicles basically developed to the extent they just basically leapfrogged them technologically. So yeah, it's I'd like to see an EV type world, but I'm a realist, and there's a guy who's an English guy who's an engineer lawyer based in Sydney, and he's got a website. He's always picking out the flaws in the EV equation. So what I used to get was just basically EV zealots online, but now I'm actually seeing a lot more people actually criticising them. Now that may be because I've changed my choice of people to listen to. That's always one of the dangers, I guess, with YouTube. You've got to basically, you can affect the algorithm that way. So I may be getting now a bias towards anti-EV. I'm happy for people to talk positive about EVs if it really is a positive story, but one of the last ones was Cleanerwatt, the guy from Cleanerwatt, who's a bit of an EV zealot. He was raving about a 5% increase in the battery storage for some Panasonic batteries, and I thought, gee, they're getting a bit desperate when they've got to make a headline about a 5% improvement. It's just, we need a lot more than that. We need, and the fast charging is one of the crucial things too. So there you go. Other thing is that the charging costs have gone up so much that now they're pretty well equivalent in public charging stations to what you pay for petrol. So there used to be a big cost advantage and that's gone. So not looking good. Please consider subscribing to my channel if you think there's anything there of use to you or entertainment or whatever. And either do that or give me a thumbs up, or if you're feeling really energetic, do both. That'd be great. But please don't ignore me. That's the worst thing you can do on YouTube, is be ignored.